Deforestation is one of the major causes of global warming. As many prefer to cut down indigenous trees for timber and biomass, the future of planet Earth is at risk of severe climate change and disastrous consequences. In Uganda, 73.6 kilohectares of tree cover has been lost by 2020 as major forest reserves are encroached on by questionable investors, squatters and agriculture ventures. Major natural forest reserves like Mabira Forest, Budongo Forest and national parks like Queen Elizabeth have too fallen victim of deforestation. So what is the way forward? In a world where we need timber for construction, firewood and energy, but risk losing it all. The solution? Forestation. Coming up.
For all the individuals who have some areas to spare, I think tree planting is the investment where you will not go wrong. The steel industry is not getting any cheaper. We cannot afford building our roofs using steel. Definitely the demand will still continue. And the population, with the growing population, definitely the market is also growing.
The high demand for commercial forest products like timber, pulp, newsprint and so much more in the construction industry and energy sector has continued to prompt domestic deforestation, driving the government of Uganda and botanists to look for solutions to this global problem. Among those is Busoga Forestry Company Limited, located in Mayuge District, Bukaleva. The company started its venture in 1996 in Bukaleva Central Forest Reserve, then extended to Kachung Forest Reserve in Dokolo District under a license with the Natural Forest Authority.
My name is Chiza Simon. I'm the Environment, Social and Governance Manager for Busoga Forestry Company. Busoga Forestry Company is a carbon offset, afforestation, reforestation company. We plant trees to generate carbon offsets, quality wood products, and other forestry related products. In Uganda, it has been documented that the forest cover has declined over the years, and most recently it has reduced so significantly that due to the rising demand of forest products and with a current population of over 90% still depending on biomass as a source of energy, there has been demand for supply of this kind of fuel, both at household level and some of the production lines within the factories. On this forest management unit, we mainly plant the pine species, to be specific, Pinus caribea. Recently we've started a trial of Pinus Tecuminae or P-Tech. These are mainly for dimensional timber or timber for the construction industry and other timber-based products such as furniture, doors. It produces light timber, yet with very good strength properties. So the tensile strength of this particular pine is much better than the hardwood.
Forestry is a nature venture that majorly sustains its growth with little need of attention and irrigation once out of the nursery. Busoga Forestry Company mainly grows pine and eucalyptus species, varieties with a shorter maturity period of 8 to 25 years compared to the indigenous trees like the Muvule tree that takes over 50 years to hit full growth.
The other species that we plant, we have eucalyptus clones. We mainly planting GUs or Grandis Europhila, clonal eucalyptus, which are very unique in a way that they produce straight stems, which is very good for the transmission pole industry, but also take a much shorter time to reach a maturity. In a range of about 8 to 10 years, you're able to get a size of a transmission pole required by the market. However, we do also plant other indigenous species, such as Myzopsis eminai, which is commonly known as the musizi. We do Kyanthothica, that's it's a mahogany, indigenous in most of the tropical forests, including the Budongo forest. It produces red timber, and it takes a much longer period of time to grow, as I explained, because it's an indigenous species, in excess of 50 years if you're to cut timber out of it. But to allow for species diversity, but also to promote biodiversity on the forest management unit, we plant those species.
So how does the company manage to grow such trees?
Basically, the trees we plant, they're either raised from seed or from cuttings. The eucalyptus that we plant derive from cuttings, which are grown in a mother garden, which supplies the cuttings. And then the seed, the pines, are generated from the seed, which is imported from Australia, because that's where most of the pines originate, but also ensuring the quality of the seedlings that we are going to generate at the end of the day. These spend a minimum of at least 4 months for the pines within the nursery, and then thereafter they are taken out into the plantation or into the compartments. The compartments are the smallest management units that are normally of the same age with the same species. So they are planted at even spacing to allow for uniformity in growth, but also for monitoring purposes to ensure that we manage the stocking at given time intervals during their growth periods. We do not only plant a single tree species, we mix different tree species to allow for diversity and also to create environments that other living organisms can thrive. As part of the transition from conventional way of raising seedlings, currently we use the pine bark, which is like an organic media to grow the seedlings. It's basically the bark of the pine itself, which we collect from our mature plantations, and we use it as a growth media for the pines. This allows for exclusion of disease-carrying organisms that we would rather get in other forms of media, but also ensure that the trees get the initial boost as they grow, because they're actually growing within their own media. So that allows us to ensure survival, but also to ensure that quality seedlings are raised at the end of the day, and they're able to survive out there in nature, where this bark is retrieved.
When you are choosing a species to plant, you might want to know the products derived from it, hence predict your profit and inform your investment.
Unlike the pines, the eucalyptus have got other products that can be generated out of it depending on the age. If it can't fit within either the building poles, those are the much smaller sizes, it can be sold as a transmission pole. But if it cannot fit within the transmission pole category, it can definitely be converted into the dimensional timber. So on the positive, eucalyptus has got quite diverse products that one can be able to generate as compared to the pines, whilst it grows much faster as compared to the pines. But if you're looking at the construction industry, because of its light nature, the timber itself, the pine timber is more preferred, because if you're to put up a roof truss which is having, let's say, 1,000 pieces of timber joined together, you would imagine the weight you'll be putting onto the building. Yet for pine, once it's dry, it's lighter, yet maintaining the strength properties.
Have a clue on what species to plant? When you cut one tree down, it's imperative that you plant 2 more in its place. Chiza Simon talks investment and profits from forestry right after the break. But before you go, a fun fact about forests. Did you know that forests are home to over 80% of land animals and plants, and 1.6 billion people around the world depend on forests for their livelihood? So, think twice before you cut down a tree. Welcome back to Seeds of Gold. Before the break, Chiza Simon, a manager at Busoga Forestry Company, highlighted the significance of forestation and what species to plant. The pine and eucalyptus tree have a shorter maturity span and bear more commercial value as their demand is high in the construction and carpentry industry. So, if you are interested in joining the forestation industry, profit is almost guaranteed. Busoga Forestry Company plants on over 1,400 hectares of land and will wait 10 to 25 years to harvest. But with more land, you can increase on the frequency of harvest.
The forestry industry is actually a land-based investment. And like most of the land-based investments, normally land is a resource that is competed by different enterprises, from agriculture, settlement. But as an individual, you need to evaluate what your objectives are and what your needs are. Definitely, like all other investments, there is input capital that you require per unit area. If, let's say, per hectare, if you're to do eucalyptus, at least the first 1 year, you need a minimum. If you already have the land, that is 1 hectare, you need a minimum of about 3 million shillings, because you could consider the cost of clearing the land if it's not yet cleared, the cost of the seedlings that you would put in your investment, because if you're to use quality seedlings like what we use, definitely you would not go for inferior seedlings that are sold along the roadside, because definitely that will affect the quality of your product that you'll be getting out at the end of the day. Because normally the seedlings, yes, they look almost the same when they are still in the nursery, but you would only realize at a later stage that what I bought was probably not. But you've already spent a lot of time, in excess of 2-3 years, growing something of poor quality because of the source of your planting material. So it's always very keen for someone to be sure of the source of your planting material if you're to make money out of your investment. I've talked about a minimum of 3 million shillings at individual level, because definitely there are some things that you may not do, things like the intensity of weeding, some things you could use, family labor to help you, the usual maintenance. Definitely at some point you'll have to quantify it, but if you're to use your available resources, definitely that would be like the starting point if you already have the 1 hectare of land. But if you're to do eucalyptus, within a period of 2 years actually, you can decide to sell either as building poles, the ones that they use in scaffoldings, or if you're to let them grow for another 2 years, then you could go in the next product category, which are the fencing posts, which definitely also attracts a different price rate. If you can't wait much longer, you can do 8 years. 8 years is not a lot of time.
After waiting for 8 years, how much money should a potential investor expect to make?
The amount that you will be able to make, the assurance I would give will not be the same as what you invested because of the changing dynamics within the population. I mentioned over 90% of the Ugandan population depends on biomass for their energy needs, which trend I don't think is going to change anytime soon because of our population structure, but also our level of advancement in terms of technology. Much as we are envisaging the use of natural gas, but not so many people can afford a gas as a source of energy. But also within the region, there are countries that are still growing. They still require transmission poles for extension of their electricity lines, but also construction industry in those countries. South Sudan is not very far from us. Burundi, Tanzania is also still growing. People are still constructing. Even in Uganda, people are still building. The steel industry is not getting any cheaper. We cannot afford building our roofs using steel. Definitely the demand will still continue. And the population, with the growing population, definitely the market is also growing. So I would say one will be able to make a very decent income in forestry.
Indeed, although the forestry business is one that requires patience and less day-to-day attention, but like any other venture, growing a forest has its challenges too.
One of the biggest challenges in forest plantation development is the issue of fires. These being coniferous forests, they are highly flammable. Illegal activities. When you look at working in a remote area, but also in a community which is almost 90, actually 100% depending on biomass as their source of energy. As you are coming, even most of the highways, the forest cover has reduced. That means that the amount available to meet the needs of the local communities in terms of firewood for their household use is a bit of a challenge. Some individuals move as far as Jinja to come and collect firewood. All in all, I think it's a worthwhile investment, given the benefits that come along with it, because you know, the temperatures that we experience here in the forest, they are much different from what people in let's say Kampala are experiencing. The quality of air that we breathe here is very different, you can attest. You cannot smell anything like either something burning, you cannot. The only time you will smell of any foreign material is when something unique is happening, either it's a fire or someone has done something that is not right. So, and with the environmental protection, we believe that these products that we send out into the market, they help at least providing that much needed alternative to using the natural trees or the indigenous species to meet the household needs and also the construction requirement for timber.
The benefits of forestry are tremendous. Other byproducts from the pine trees is tap.
Just to improve on the revenue streams, the petrochemical industry or the paint industry has picked interest in resin. This is basically sap from the pines that they tap. When trees attain a certain diameter for not more than 3 years, this is mainly during the last growing years of the tree. This avoids situation whereby you're going to compromise on your growth rates of the trees, but also provides you an opportunity to generate some income before you finally go into harvesting the tree itself. So this also helps in generating that much needed revenue stream to run other tree planting programs, but also implement other community projects as we do as a company.
Forestry is not only important for humanity now, but for the future. It is time to mitigate the demand of timber and biomass by providing alternative ways to acquire forest products in a managed system.
The trend in the demand for forest products is not going to change. And what that means is that if we do not provide an alternative, we are going to lose our entire forest estate. And what that means is that the agricultural fields that we pride in, the food that we are growing, will cease to be productive, because these are the sources of pollinators. These are the sources of the rainfall that Uganda as a country depends on, because there's very limited irrigation agriculture within the country. So it will definitely impact negatively if we do not act now by providing that much needed alternative. So as long as the exotic species have been planted responsibly and in the right sites, I think we are able to mitigate the impacts of climate change. This is a time to encourage, as much as possible, responsible forest management. Whether exotic species are planted or indigenous species. But at the end of the day, we need to ensure that the objectives of the organizations or the individuals are met, but also the objectives of conserving our environment are also met in one or another by providing that much needed alternative to the current situation. So for all the individuals who have some areas to spare, I think tree planting is the investment where you will not go wrong.
A small profit today might have a higher cost tomorrow. Before you cut down that tree, pause and think about how much impact you can make by planting one instead. Protect our country and future by reporting cases of deforestation to concerned authorities. Here at Seeds of Gold, we hope to create awareness and educate you, the farmer, to prosperity. See you next week for yet another inspiring story on how to reap from your seeds of gold.